The grit presses deep into the raw skin of your kneecap. It is the exact same loose, jutting brick your joint scraped against yesterday, rough, unyielding, and tearing at flesh that has not fully healed since the frost set in. Your toes, bare and black, curl inside the narrow throat of the flue, searching blindly for a half-inch of mortar to hold your weight. The air here tastes of ancient smoke, rusted iron, and damp clay. You reach up with your scraper, the metal cold and heavy in your small, numb hand. You do not need a clock. The absolute freezing dark is enough to tell you it is morning. You breathe in the dry, choking ruin of other people's fires. You press your bruised spine against the masonry, inching upward in this suffocating silence, simply so the family sleeping in the clean, wealthy rooms below may wake to a pristine hearth. They rest under heavy white linens, dreaming of the dawn. You are the invisible machinery of their comfort, absorbing the filth the house refuses to keep. Across the sprawling, fog-choked burrows, the domestic architecture demands this quiet, unbroken cycle. Flues are built increasingly narrow, twisting in complex brick helixes that no sweeping brush can navigate. Boys like you, parish apprentices bound by ink and law, or those traded by desperate families for the mere price of their keep, are the stock-in-trade of the master sweep. You wear the rough wool climbing cap, a crown of ash that settles on your head like gray felt, your thin legs wrapped in coarse climbing drawers as the master's ledger governs your mornings. But what must you do when the brickwork unexpectedly tapers in the pitch black of the chimney? What happens on the morning your shivering knees simply will not lock against the glazed lining? How do you quiet the rising panic when your shoulder wedges tight in a blind bend? The air grows thin with old soot, and the master's voice calling from the register plate below fades into a muffled, hollow echo. The soot bag waits on the hearth. The rope waits in the yard. This is a trade that spends boys until nothing is left to spend. This is the dark reality of Victorian chimney sweeps, of climbing boys, and of the long, dark measure between hearth and sky. The brick keeps its width. You keep your breath. Somewhere below, the house pretends it was always clean.
You have found history for sleepyheads. You are safe in your room. The doors are locked, the air is calm, and the heavy, hurried demands of your day can finally be set down. As you settle into the quiet, pull your blankets a little closer and allow the glowing screens and modern anxieties to slowly fade into the background. Here, in the soft twilight of our shared history, there is nothing left for you to solve, nothing left for you to manage. You only need to listen. Before we step fully into the early morning fog, I want to gently ask that if this quiet history helps you find rest, leaving a soft like on the video helps our channel reach other restless minds in need of a quiet harbor. It is a small gesture, but it keeps this quiet corner of the world glowing. History is so often told from the very top, through the grand timelines of empires, the sweeping declarations of Parliament, and the marble statues of famous reformers. But tonight, we are looking from the inside out. We are exploring the hidden, claustrophobic geometry of the 19th century city. The journey we are about to take is a witness reconstruction of a deeply documented trade.
This is not a fictionalized horror story, nor is it a biography of politicians. It is a composite drawn directly from the sober reality of parish apprenticeship bindings, the master sweep's daily call books, and the architectural measurements of narrow urban flues. Every scrape of the brick, every rough weave of the soot bag, and every cold morning walk is rooted in the lived historical archive of the children whose labor made the warmth of the Victorian era possible. Tonight's quiet history is the dark reality of Victorian chimney sweeps, the long dark of the climbing boys, told from inside the flue rather than above it. Now, lower your shoulders into the mattress. Let the modern century fall away as we trace a single, spiraling path through the dark. Tonight, we will open our eyes in the hour before anyone else. We will understand who sold you into the bag. We will feel our way through 14 inches and the law of brick. We will walk the quiet streets governed by the master's mourning book. We will gently tally skin, soot, and the price of a climb. We will learn patience in the bend that has no name. We will listen closely to what the house does not hear. We will find quiet company among the other boys in the dark. We will gather 3 small mercies to carry us through the heavy ash, and at last we will find our rest when the flue lets you go. Settle in. Let your breathing slow to match the steady rhythm of the old world. When the next voice settles, you will already be awake, and the cold floorboards of the packing shed will be waiting.
You do not wake to the sun. You wake to a darkness so absolute that it feels like a physical weight pressing against your closed eyelids. You open your eyes, and the blackness of the packing shed remains completely unchanged. There is no window here, no rusted iron grate to let in the creeping silver of the pre-dawn sky. There is only the stagnant air trapped beneath the floorboards of the master sweep's house. You lie perfectly still, listening. The world above is entirely silent, caught in that hollow hour before the first heavy carts begin to rattle over the cobblestones. Down here, in the freezing cellar, there is only the slow, rhythmic sound of shallow breathing. You are lying on a pallet of damp, flattened straw, covered by a mound of empty soot bags. The loose weave of the canvas presses rough and unyielding against your cheek. These are the same wide sacks that by nightfall will be heavy with the black, powdery harvest of a dozen wealthy chimneys. Now they are your only blankets. They smell fiercely of the trade, of crushed carbon, of rusted iron grates, of damp mortar, and of ancient calcified wood smoke. It is the scent of 1,000 burned fires condensed into a fine powder. Over the months, the microscopic dust has worked its way deep into the fibers of the canvas, acting as a strange, stifling insulation against the bitter chill of the cellar floor. Your sensory clock of the morning begins with the temperature of the air against your face. It is freezing. A damp, penetrating cold seems to rise directly from the earth itself, bypassing the skin and settling deep into your bones. You shift your weight beneath the canvas, and immediately your joints issue their quiet, burning protest. Your knees ache with a throbbing intensity. Your elbows are stiff. The skin along your spine feels tight and bruised. Sleep has not healed the abrasions from yesterday's narrow flues. It has only allowed the raw flesh to stiffen into a temporary, fragile stillness. You slowly push the canvas bags aside. The cold air rushes in, raising goosebumps along your thin, trembling arms. You swing your legs over the edge of the straw pallet.
Your toes search in the darkness, moving past a broken wooden brush handle until your bare heel meets the floor. The cold brick, the fine, granular grit beneath your soul, the sudden, sharp reality of the waking world. You press your weight down, and a shiver violently racks your narrow frame, starting at your freezing heels and traveling all the way up your rigid spine. Beside you, the mound of canvas shifts. The other boys are waking too. There are 3 of them sharing this corner of the packing shed, curled together in a tight knot to preserve whatever meager body heat they can generate. You hear the youngest one, a boy no taller than a wooden walking stick, let out an involuntary whimper as he uncurls his bruised legs. Another boy answers with a dry, rattling cough that echoes against the brick walls, a sound that ends in a quiet, wheezing sigh. There are no words exchanged. There is no morning greeting. There is only the shared, silent understanding that the night is over and the vertical dark awaits.
You reach into the pitch black beside your straw bed, your numb fingers searching for your climbing clothes. You find the ragged woolen shirt. It is cold and damp. You find the climbing drawers. As you pick them up, they do not fold or drape over your arm. They hold their shape, rigid and unyielding. The cheap cotton and coarse wool have been saturated for weeks with an impenetrable mixture of chimney grease, dry ash, and the sweat of your own labor. The soot has dried into a hardened crust, turning the fabric into an abrasive armor. Pulling these garments onto your body is a slow, deliberate agony. You drag the freezing wool over your head. The stiff, blackened collar scrapes against the sensitive skin of your neck. You step into the drawers, pulling the rigid fabric up over your bruised, unhealed knees. The dried soot catches on the scabs, a sharp momentary sting that forces you to draw a quick breath through your teeth. You tie the rough string at your waist. Your fingers are clumsy with the cold, fumbling with the frayed ends of the cord. The clothes offer no real warmth. They merely offer a familiar weight, a second skin of filth that you are required to wear. You close your mouth and swallow. This is the moment the morning truly begins. The first swallow of the day always brings the same unavoidable sensation. It tastes of ash. The fine, invisible powder that floats in the stagnant air of the shed has settled on your lips and coated the back of your throat while you slept. It is a dry, metallic taste, like licking an old iron grate left out in the rain. Your soft palate feels coated in velvet dust. You run your tongue over your teeth, feeling the slight gritty resistance of the soot. It is a taste you will carry with you until the sun sets, a constant reminder of the element you breathe. Far above the cellar, muffled by the earth and the brick, a distant church clock begins to toll. The strikes are slow, heavy, and resonant in the thick city fog. 1, 2, 3, 4. The vibration fades into the damp air. In the elegant squares and wealthy terraces just a few streets away, the world is still deeply, blissfully asleep. In those grand, towering houses, the masters and mistresses lie beneath heavy, snow-white linens. Their bedrooms are quiet, their carpets are thick, their curtains are drawn tight against the winter chill. Soon the household servants will rise in the dark. They will need to lay the fires in the drawing rooms, the formal parlors, and the bedchambers. They will expect a perfect, unhindered draw of air, a bright, smokeless flame to push back the damp English morning. But before the fire can be safely laid, the chimney must be cleared of its dangerous buildup. And so the central paradox of your existence settles over your thin shoulders like the woolen shirt. You wake in the freezing filth so that others may have a clean fire. You inhabit the absolute darkness so that their morning may be bright. You wear the soot so that their white linens remain perfectly unblemished. You
are the invisible, necessary mechanism of their comfort.
You drop to your knees on the cold floor and begin to gather the tools of your trade. You know their shapes by touch alone. Your hand finds the scraper, a flat, rusted piece of iron attached to a short wooden handle. The metal is freezing against your bare palm. Next, you find the hand brush, its stiff bristles worn down on one side from the endless repetitive friction against glazed flue linings. Finally, you pick up the climbing cap. It is a piece of rough, dark cloth designed to be pulled tightly over your hair and eyes, a meager defense against the suffocating downpour of soot. You pull it onto your head. The coarse wool catches on your brow. The boys are fully dressed now. You sit together on the edge of the straw pallet in the absolute dark, waiting. The air in the shed is still. The heavy, damp, metallic silence stretches out. You clutch the iron scraper in your hand, feeling its familiar weight. You do not speak to the boy beside you. You simply listen to the quiet, rhythmic sound of his breathing, syncing your own shallow breaths to his. The anticipation sits low in your stomach, a cold, hard knot of dread that you have long since learned to ignore. Then comes the sound that officially breaks the night, a heavy, deliberate footfall on the floorboards directly above your head. The master sweep is awake. The sound of his boots echoes through the hollow ceiling. You hear the scrape of a wooden chair being pushed back, the distant muffled clatter of a tin mug on the table. The master is drinking his small beer, wrapping his thick coat around his broad shoulders, preparing to lead his soot-stained apprentices into the fog. The heavy boots move towards the top of the cellar stairs. The wooden steps creak violently under his weight. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. The sound is a physical pressure in the room. You stand up, your bare feet planted firmly on the cold brick floor. The other boys stand beside you, shadows moving within the deeper shadow of the shed. The heavy door hand latch rattles sharply. The hinges scream in protest as the heavy timber is pulled open. The door opens to the street level, and the pitch black of the shed is instantly pierced by the pale, ghostly gray of the morning fog. The freezing, damp air of the city rushes down the stairs, cutting through your stiff clothes like a blade. The master sweep stands in the doorway, a towering silhouette against the mist, holding a coiled length of rope and a stack of empty canvas bags. He does not say good morning. He simply turns and begins to climb the narrow stair, the bags slung over one shoulder, the rope knocking softly against his heavy coat. You follow. The other boys follow. The fog takes the first heat from your mouth and gives nothing back. Somewhere above the street, the flues are waiting in their dark wits. The brick keeps its width. You keep your breath. Somewhere below, the house pretends it was always clean. You follow the master sweep through the freezing, vapor-choked streets of the early morning. The cobblestones are slick with a thin layer of winter rime, biting at the bare soles of your feet with every step. Over your shoulder, the empty canvas soot bag hangs light and limp, offering no warmth against the biting damp. But there is another weight you carry in the quiet of this hour. It is the heavy, silent knowledge of how you came to be walking in this fog, trailing behind a man who owns the rights to your waking life. Your presence here is not the tragic, singular tale of a storybook orphan. There is no grand drama to your binding, no sudden turn of dramatic fate that left you alone in the world. Your path into the trade is merely a composite of the same quiet, bureaucratic tragedies that fill the parish ledgers and the master sweep's callbooks across the city. You are the shape of many lives. You are the inevitable byproduct of a society that builds narrow, winding flues and finds itself with a surplus of small, hungry children.
You were not stolen away in the night. You were simply a transaction. Perhaps you came to the bag through the cold, echoing halls of the parish workhouse. The memory of that binding is anchored in the smell of carbolic soap, boiled oats, and old yellowed paper. You remember standing in a drafty wood-paneled room, shivering in a thin linen smock. Before you sat the board of guardians, men in heavy woolen coats and starched collars, sitting behind a high oak table. They looked at you not as a child, but as an entry in a ledger, a daily expense of a few pennies that needed to be erased from the parish rolls. The master sweep stood beside you, holding his soot-stained hat in his hands. He offered to take you away, to teach you the mystery of his trade, in exchange for a meager premium, perhaps 2 or 3 pounds paid out by the parish to cover your initial keep. The transaction was finalized with heavy black ink. You remember the scratch of the clerk's metal nib moving across the thick, stiff parchment. Then a damp sponge was pressed against your small thumb. You were told to press it firmly onto the bottom of the page. The wet thumbprint left a whirled black smudge on a document you would never be taught to read. In that single silent gesture, your childhood was signed away until you reached the age of 21. Or perhaps the bargain was struck much closer to home, in a quiet, freezing room where a widowed mother or a desperate aunt simply had no more bread to slice. The memory of this path is smaller, tighter, and more suffocated. You remember the empty hearth, the hollow ache in your stomach, and the soft knock at the wooden door. The master sweep stepped into your home, filling the small space with the overwhelming scent of stale small beer and ancient soot.
He did not speak to you. He looked at your narrow shoulders, feeling the joints of your knees and elbows with rough, calloused hands, judging your width as a carpenter might judge a piece of timber. He noted your size, calculating how many years of climbing he could squeeze from your frame before your shoulders grew too broad for the standard 14-inch flues. The bargain was struck in low voices. Perhaps a few silver shillings were slid across a scarred wooden table. Or perhaps there was no money exchanged at all, only the grim, silent promise that the master would take you for your keep, that he would provide the straw pallet and the daily bread that your family could no longer afford. The heavy door clicked shut behind you, and you were led out into the gray light, traded for the price of your own survival. Whichever path brought you to the master's yard, the transformation was always the same. It began with the stripping away of your past and the assigning of your capital. You were given the tools of the trade, which amounted to little more than the clothes on your back. A climbing boy's first uniform is never newly sewn. It is always an inheritance, a discarded skin left behind by someone else. You remember the first time the master handed you a heavy, coarse wool cloak to wear over your thin shirt in the dead of winter. It was far too long, the hem dragging against the dirt of the yard, the sleeves requiring 3 thick rolls before your pale hands could emerge. It smelled deeply, permanently of sweat, old ash, and damp brick. It smelled of the boy who had worn it before you, the boy who had grown too large for the flues, or perhaps the boy who had gone into a difficult bend and had not returned. You pulled the heavy, oversized garment around your shaking shoulders, wrapping yourself in the literal fabric of the trade. With the clothes came the slow, inevitable thinning of your identity. In the master's house, your Christian name lost its utility. A name is a thing for a child who is loved, or a child who is expected to grow into a man with a place in the world.
You are stuck in trade. The master does not have the time or the inclination to remember the distinct histories of the 4 or 5 boys sleeping in his cellar. You remember the first time it happened. You were standing in the yard, sorting the stiff, soot-clogged brushes, when the master's voice bellowed from the kitchen doorway. "Hello, boy!" You did not turn. You waited for the name your mother gave you. You waited for the sound you had answered to for 6 or 7 years. Then came the sharp, sudden grip of a heavy hand on your shoulder, spinning you around to face the master's hardened gaze. It was in that moment, smelling the stale tobacco on his breath, that you realized your name was gone. It had been left behind on the parish parchment, or left on the wooden table with the shillings. You are boy now. You are sweep. When the kitchen maids call down the street for someone to clear their drawing room grate, they will not ask you by name. They will simply ask for a climbing boy.
He did not speak to you. He looked at your narrow shoulders, feeling the joints of your knees and elbows with rough, calloused hands, judging your width as a carpenter might judge a piece of timber. He noted your size, calculating how many years of climbing he could squeeze from your frame before your shoulders grew too broad for the standard 14-inch flues. The bargain was struck in low voices. Perhaps a few silver shillings were slid across a scarred wooden table. Or perhaps there was no money exchanged at all, only the grim, silent promise that the master would take you for your keep, that he would provide the straw pallet and the daily bread that your family could no longer afford. The heavy door clicked shut behind you, and you were led out into the gray light, traded for the price of your own survival. Whichever path brought you to the master's yard, the transformation was always the same. It began with the stripping away of your past and the assigning of your capital. You were given the tools of the trade, which amounted to little more than the clothes on your back. A climbing boy's first uniform is never newly sewn. It is always an inheritance, a discarded skin left behind by someone else. You remember the first time the master handed you a heavy, coarse wool cloak to wear over your thin shirt in the dead of winter. It was far too long, the hem dragging against the dirt of the yard, the sleeves requiring 3 thick rolls before your pale hands could emerge. It smelled deeply, permanently of sweat, old ash, and damp brick. It smelled of the boy who had worn it before you, the boy who had grown too large for the flues, or perhaps the boy who had gone into a difficult bend and had not returned. You pulled the heavy, oversized garment around your shaking shoulders, wrapping yourself in the literal fabric of the trade. With the clothes came the slow, inevitable thinning of your identity. In the master's house, your Christian name lost its utility. A name is a thing for a child who is loved, or a child who is expected to grow into a man with a place in the world. You are stuck in trade. The master does not have the time or the inclination to remember the distinct histories of the 4 or 5 boys sleeping in his cellar. You remember the first time it happened. You were standing in the yard, sorting the stiff, soot-clogged brushes, when the master's voice bellowed from the kitchen doorway. "Hello, boy!" You did not turn. You waited for the name your mother gave you. You waited for the sound you had answered to for 6 or 7 years. Then came the sharp, sudden grip of a heavy hand on your shoulder, spinning you around to face the master's hardened gaze. It was in that moment, smelling the stale tobacco on his breath, that you realized
Your name was gone. It had been left behind on the parish parchment, or left on the wooden table with the shillings. You are boy now. You are sweep. When the kitchen maids call down the street for someone to clear their drawing room grate, they will not ask you by name. They will simply ask for a climbing boy.
The kitchen is completely silent when you are finally pushed forward to the hearth. The heavy iron range sits cold and dormant in the weak, flickering light of a single tallow candle held by a shivering maid. She does not look you in the eye. She simply points to the grate and takes a step back, retreating into the shadows of the room. You stand barefoot on the stone hearth, untying the rough cord of your oversized wool cloak and letting it fall to the floor. The damp, freezing air of the house immediately bites at your thin linen shirt and stiff climbing drawers. You step onto the cast-iron register plate, feeling the icy metal through the calluses on your soles. You pull the coarse wool of your climbing cap down sharply over your forehead, making sure it covers your eyes and the bridge of your nose. It is a meager shield, but it is the only defense you possess. You grip your iron scraper in your right hand, feeling its familiar, heavy handle. Then you step into the opening of the fireplace and tilt your head back. This is the geometry of your entire world. You look up into the dark shaft, a vertical tunnel of brick disappearing into absolute, suffocating blackness. The weak candlelight from the kitchen illuminates only the first few feet of the flue, casting long, wavering shadows against the thick, crusty layers of unburned carbon and ash clinging to the walls. Beyond that faint glow, there is nothing. It is a void that pulls the cold air from the room, carrying the sour, metallic scent of ancient smoke and damp mortar. You are staring into the throat of the house, and it is waiting to swallow you whole. The architecture of the Victorian city is a miracle of grand facades and elegant drawing rooms, but behind the plaster and the wallpaper, it is governed by a rigid, unforgiving mathematics. Builders and masons, attempting to squeeze as many fireplaces as possible into the narrow walls of the new terraces, construct their flues to a standard, minimal dimension, 14 inches by 9. Consider the span of a normal breath. Consider the natural width of a child's resting shoulders. 14 inches is not a space meant for a human body. It is a space designed strictly for the passage of smoke and hot vapor. It is a dimension that actively rejects the presence of bones, lungs, and muscle. Yet this is the space you are required to fill. Your shoulders, as thin as they are, span just wide enough to scrape against the glazed, soot-hardened lining of the bricks on either side. To move upward, you cannot climb as a boy climbs a tree, pulling with your hands and pushing with your feet. You must become a different kind of creature altogether. You must learn the slow, agonizing law of the brick. You lift your arms straight above your head, the iron scraper held tight, and wedge your small frame into the narrow opening. The climb begins with a violent contortion. You press your spine flat against the back wall of the flue. You draw your knees up tightly toward your chest, pressing your bare, blackened feet against the opposite wall. You are now a human wedge, suspended in the dark by the sheer friction of your own flesh against the masonry. The movement is painfully slow, an inch at a time. You push your back upward against the rough brick, the fabric of your shirt tearing slightly, the skin of your spine taking the brunt of the heavy scrape. Then you plant your shoulders firmly and slide your knees higher, the raw, unhealed scabs scraping against the mortar joints. Push, slide, hold. Push, slide, hold.
It is a mechanical inchworm rhythm that requires every ounce of your strength just to keep from slipping backward into the grate. With every upward thrust, your right hand works the scraper. You reach up into the darkness above your head, scraping the flat iron blade against the heavy, caked layers of soot. The sound is a loud, rasping echo in the tight space, a harsh, grating noise that vibrates deep in your own chest. As the soot breaks free, it falls. It falls in a heavy, suffocating downpour, striking your capped head, settling thickly onto your shoulders, and filling the tiny sliver of air between your face and the brick. The fine, powdery dust immediately coats your lips and enters your nostrils. You must time your breathing perfectly. You learn to take short, shallow sips of air only after the heaviest clouds of ash have settled, breathing through the rough wool of the cap pulled over your mouth. The brick is the only authority here, and it is entirely merciless. There is no negotiating with a 14-inch square. If your shoulder catches on a protruding ledge of sloppy mortar, you cannot turn to free it. You can only force your way past, leaving a smear of red on the black walls. Your body becomes a physical tool, a flexible brush of bone and skin designed to sweep the corners where the iron cannot reach. Your elbows find the loose bricks, your spine learns the exact helix of the twisting chimney. You do not merely clean the flue, you wear it down with your own body, just as it slowly wears down yours. And the flues rarely go straight up. To avoid windows, to route around bedchambers, and to join multiple fireplaces into a single stack on the roof, the masons build sharp angles and sweeping slants into the hidden masonry. You reach a point 20 feet above the hearth where the chimney suddenly turns at a harsh right angle, sloping horizontally before continuing its vertical climb. This is the geometry that breaks a boy. In these slanted horizontal sections, you cannot use your knees and back to hold your weight. You must lie flat on your stomach, crawling like a worm through the absolute black. It is in these horizontal runs that the soot gathers the thickest, accumulating in heavy, soft drifts like black snow. The master sweeps call these ledges the wrong cleanings. As you push your way through the horizontal slant, the soot piles up ahead of your face, threatening to block your mouth entirely. The air grows thick, hot, and stale. The weight of the house presses down on the bricks mere inches above your head. You count your shallow breaths, focusing entirely on the slow, agonizing drag of your hips against the floor of the flue.
No one gently taught you this terrible geometry. There was no patient instruction, no diagram drawn in the dirt of the master's yard. You were simply shown the grate one morning and expected to understand forever. You remember the very first time you were sent up, standing terrified on the register plate, the darkness looming above. You remember the master's journeyman lighting a twist of straw in the grate beneath your feet, the sudden, scorching heat forcing you to scramble upward into the blinding soot to escape the flame. You learned the grip of your knees because gravity demanded it. You learned to pull your cap down because the dust blinded you. You learned the law of the brick through the immediate, brutal consequence of failure. Now, the mechanics are as natural to you as walking. You do not think about the pain in your elbows or the raw, weeping skin on your knees. You simply climb. You scrape, you push, you breathe in the ash. The world outside the chimney, the cold morning, the sleeping, wealthy family, the rattling carts on the cobblestones, ceases to exist. There is only the rough texture of the mortar, the heavy handle of the iron scraper, and the desperate, burning need
to reach the pot at the top of the stack. You wedge your back against the wall once more, bringing your knees to your chest. The soot rains down in the dark, covering your thin shoulders in a thick, velvety layer of gray. You close your eyes beneath the cap and take another shallow, metallic breath. The climb continues. The brick keeps its width. You keep your breath. Somewhere below, the house pretends it never forced a child into the dark.
You emerge from the back door of the first house, stepping from the warm, stale air of the kitchen back into the freezing vapor of the street. Your lungs take in the sharp, icy dampness of the fog, coughing out a thin cloud of gray dust that quickly dissolves into the morning mist. The first climb is done. Your raw knees pulse with a fresh, familiar heat, and the coarse wool of your climbing shirt is now thoroughly saturated with a new layer of dry, powdery ash. You pull the drawstrings of your canvas sack tight. It is no longer limp. It holds the heavy, crushed carbon of the wealthy family's night, a dead weight that you now swing over your aching shoulder. Ahead of you, already a dozen paces down the wet cobblestones, the master sweep is walking. He does not look back to see if you have gathered your tools. He does not check to see if your bare feet are bleeding on the sharp stones. His attention is entirely fixed on the morning route, a mental map of the city's hearths governed by the grease-stained, leather-bound ledger tucked into the deep pocket of his heavy coat. This fog at this hour is not merely a mist, it is a physical presence. It hangs low over the pavement, a thick yellow-gray blanket that tastes faintly of the river and the distant smoldering ironworks. As you follow the master, the city slowly begins to stir around you, revealing the other ghosts of the early morning. A heavy milk cart rattles past, the iron-rimmed wheels grinding loudly against the stone, the breath of the exhausted horse pluming white in the air. A night watchman, heavy with sleep, shuffles past on his way home, his lantern casting a weak, swinging arc of light that barely penetrates the gloom. These other workers do not look at you. In the hierarchy of the street, the sweeps boy is a shadow, a preacher of the dirt to be stepped around and ignored. This small, battered ledger in the master's pocket is the undisputed authority of your waking life. It is the master's morning book, a catalogue of addresses, narrow streets, and broad squares that dictates the exact rhythm of your survival. You do not know how to read the cramped, smudged ink on its heavy pages, but you know its power perfectly. It decides whether your morning will be spent in the relatively wide, straight flues of an old tavern or in the cramped, twisting helixes of the new townhouses. It is the silent engine of the master's economy, transforming your pain, your breath, and your bruised skin into cold silver shillings. You follow the master down the row of grand terraces, matching your short, uneven steps to his long, deliberate strides. At some doors, there is no need for the book. The master simply pauses at the top of the iron area steps and checks for a crude white chalk mark scrawled on the brick beside the servant's entrance, a sign left by a passing journeyman or a kitchen maid in the night, signaling a flue that is choked and smoking. When he sees the mark, he points a thick, calloused finger down the stairs. You descend into the shadows of the basement, the heavy soot bag knocking against your shins, while the master waits above, calculating the price of the job.
Entering these subterranean kitchens is an exercise in invisibility. You are a necessary evil to the staff of the house. As you step onto the clean, scrubbed flagstones of the scullery, the biting chill of the damp slate seeps instantly through the calluses on your bare feet. The air down here is heavily perfumed with the sharp, clean scent of lye soap, beeswax, and dried lavender, a staggering contrast to the metallic stink of the chimney you carry on your skin. The cook and the maids pull their crisp white aprons away from you, their faces tight with a mixture of pity and deep annoyance. You track the dark residue of the trade across their freshly washed floors, leaving a faint, perfect outline of your small, bare foot with every step. You are told to stand in the absolute corner, pressing your back against the cold, whitewashed plaster, away from the baking bread, away from the boiling kettles, while they prepare the grate. You watch the maids moving with purpose, polishing heavy copper pots that gleam like dull fire in the candlelight, entirely alienated from this world of warmth and nourishment. The kitchens themselves vary in their small mercies, creating an unpredictable hierarchy in your morning route. In some houses, an older cook might take pity on your shivering frame, wordlessly handing you a chipped clay jug of small beer. The liquid is weak, lukewarm, and slightly sour, but it cuts through the thick paste of soot that coats your tongue, washing the bitter taste of old smoke down your throat. You drink it quickly, gripping the cold clay with blackened fingers, careful not to spill a single drop onto their pristine floor. In other houses, there is nothing. There is only a sharp command to hurry, a complaint about the mess you are making, and the impatient tapping of the maid's leather shoe as you strip down to your climbing drawers on the freezing hearth. You learn to expect nothing. You learn that your presence is an intrusion, a dirty interruption to the clean, ordered rhythm of their day. When the climb is finished and the soot is swept from the register plate, the master arrives at the back door to settle the account. You stand quietly in the shadow of the doorway, holding the swollen, heavy bag, watching the transaction. Sometimes a few heavy copper coins or a silver shilling are dropped into his broad hand. Sometimes a small metal token is exchanged, a marker of credit to be settled at the end of the month. You do not see a fraction of this wealth. Your labor produces the coin, but the soot is your only physical harvest. You carry the literal weight of the master's profit on your back. To the master, the ash inside your sack is just as valuable as the silver. He will sell the heavy bags of soot to the farmers on the edge of the city who use it to fertilize their spring fields. Every ounce of dust you scrape from the brick is capital.
As the morning stretches on and the sun remains hidden behind the thick London fog, the master becomes the prevailing weather of your day. He is not a man of loud, dramatic rages. He's a force of practical economic pressure. You learn to read the tension in the set of his broad shoulders, the speed of his walk, and the subtle shifts in his gruff voice. On a good morning, when the flues are straight and the cooks are paying promptly, he might walk with a looser gait. He might reach into the deep pocket of his coat and toss a torn scrap of softer bread over his shoulder, not looking back to see if you catch it. You gather it from the wet cobblestones, brushing off the worst of the street dirt, and eat it in small, desperate bites as you walk, savoring the rare, yielding texture against your sore gums. But when the morning turns sour, when a maid refuses to pay, or when a flue takes too long to clear, the weather of the master grows cold and dangerous. You recognize the subtle tightening of his jaw. You hear the sharp, impatient crack of his wooden walking stick striking the iron railings as he strides down the street. When he is in this mood, you do not speak. You do not complain that the bag is growing too heavy for your thin arms to support, the rough rope beginning to saw into the skin of your neck. You do not limp, even as the blisters on your heels break open against the damp stones.
You shrink into your oversized cloak, attempting to become as small and unnoticeable as the shadows stretching across the pavement. As you turn a corner onto a wide, affluent square, a cold, hard knot of dread forms in the pit of your stomach. You recognize the address before the master even slows his pace. Every boy in the yard knows the shape of the grand houses on this particular row. These are the bad houses. The architecture here is impossibly grand. The buildings are imposing fortresses of pale, scrubbed stone, fronted by towering columns and guarded by heavy, spear-tipped iron railings. But in the master's mourning book, this beauty means only a terrible, punishing geometry. The flues here were built by a mason who cared only for the symmetry of the roofline, routing the chimneys in sharp, horizontal zigzags to meet at a central pot. You know exactly what awaits you inside. You know the exact ledge where the brick juts out sharply, threatening to pin your ribs. You know the exact slant where the soot drifts 3 feet deep, where you will have to crawl on your stomach, breathing in the dense, choking powder, while the master shouts for you to move faster from the grate below. The master stops in front of the heavy oak door. He does not look at the book. He simply taps the iron area railing with his stick, a sharp metallic ring that echoes in the quiet, foggy street. He turns his head slightly, his gaze falling on your trembling shoulders and the heavy bag at your feet. He points his stick toward the basement stairs. There is no negotiation. There is no appeal. The ledger demands the climb, and the master enforces the ledger. You tighten the rough cord at your waist. You grip the cold iron handle of your scraper. You take a slow, deep breath of the freezing, damp air, holding the clean oxygen in your lungs for as long as you possibly can before you begin the long descent into the shadows of the bad house. The brick keeps its width. You keep your breath. Somewhere below, the house pretends the ledger does not exist.
When you finally drop back down onto the cast iron register plate of the bad house, your body is no longer entirely your own. It has become a physical ledger, a living tally of the morning's grim economy. The master sweep has his leather-bound book to record the shillings and the addresses, but your bookkeeping is done entirely in the currency of your own skin. You step out of the grate and onto the kitchen flagstones, shivering violently as the freezing air of the room hits the damp, heavy sweat covering your chest and back. In the absolute dark of the flue, the soot and your sweat have combined into a thick, abrasive paste. It coats your neck, your arms, and your ribs. As you move, this dark mortar acts like a fine sandpaper between your raw flesh and the stiff, hardened fabric of your climbing drawers. Every step you take toward the back door is a calculated negotiation with your own joints. Your knees are the primary accounts of this brutal trade. They bear the brunt of the heavy upward thrusts, scraping against the glazed, uneven mortar of a dozen different chimneys. The skin there is never allowed to fully heal. It is a landscape of cracked calluses, deep, weeping abrasions, and hard, dark scabs where the soot has permanently settled into the open wounds. Your elbows tell a similar silent story. They are bruised a deep mottled purple beneath the layer of ash, swollen from the desperate sideways pressure required to hold your weight in the blind horizontal bends. Even the smallest features of your face bear the marks of the climb. Your lips are severely cracked from the dry, suffocating heat of the deep brick, splitting open slightly when you open your mouth to draw a heavy breath.
You taste the faint metallic tang of your own blood mixing with the ever-present ash on your tongue. The soot sits deep in the fine creases of your eyelids, in the corners of your nose, and beneath the jagged, broken edges of your fingernails. It is not merely a layer of dirt that sits on the surface of the body. It is a profound, invasive element that works its way into the very grain of your existence. Your hair, beneath the inadequate shield of the coarse climbing cap, has become a heavy, matted helmet. The fine dust mixes with the natural sweat of your scalp, caking the strands together into stiff, unyielding clumps that pull painfully at the roots whenever you turn your head. Your eyes burn with a constant low-grade heat. Despite keeping them tightly squeezed shut in the darkest bends, the airborne ash inevitably finds its way beneath your lids. Every time you blink, you feel the gritty drag of crushed carbon against the delicate surface of your eye. You try to wipe the stinging away with the back of your wrist, but this only grinds the soot deeper, leaving your vision perpetually blurred, the edges of the waking world smeared with a watery gray haze.
There are darker, quieter shadows to this physical accounting, realities that the older boys sometimes murmur about in the dead of night when the master is deeply asleep. The soot is not just an irritant, it is a poison. When the crushed carbon is ground endlessly into the delicate folds of the skin, day after day, year after year, the body inevitably begins to break down. You have seen the rough, hardened lumps that form on the older journeyman, the soot warts that refuse to heal. And you have heard the clinical, terrible name of the final toe, the cancer of the scrotum, spoken as a flat, undeniable fact of the trade. It is a medical plainness, a quiet, lurking end that waits for boys who spend their entire youth breathing in the ruin of the city's fires. You do not dwell on it. You cannot. The immediate burning ache of your shoulders demands all of your attention. You follow the master out into the street. It is midday now. The pale, watery sun has finally burned through the thickest part of the fog, casting long gray shadows across the wet cobblestones. You carry 2 full bags now, one slung over each shoulder. The canvas is stretched taut, bulging with the heavy, dense weight of packed soot. The rough ropes bite deeply into your collarbones. This is the hour of the dinner-time farthing, the cruelest and most direct economic exchange of your day. The master sweep does not provide a packed meal for you to carry. Your sustenance is entirely dependent on the physical weight you drag behind you and the unpredictable mood of the man walking 10 paces ahead. The master slows his stride as you approach a bustling market square. The air here is thick with the smell of roasting meats, boiling root vegetables, and fresh, hot bread from the baker's stalls. The scent hits your empty stomach with a sudden, violent cramp. You have had nothing but a few swallows of bitter small beer and the taste of ash since you woke on the freezing cellar floor. Your mouth waters involuntarily, the cracked skin of your lips stinging with the sudden moisture. The master stops by a low brick wall near a pie seller's cart. He turns and looks at you, his eyes dropping immediately to the bulging canvas sacks at your feet. He is performing a silent, rapid calculation. He weighs the volume of the soot, the difficulty of the flues you have cleared, and the coins resting heavily in his coarse waistcoat. If the morning has been profitable, if you have moved quickly and without complaint through the bad houses, he will reach into his coarse waistcoat. His thick fingers will produce a single, tarnished farthing. He will hold it out, dropping it on the flat top of the brick wall, rather than placing it in your blackened, outstretched hand.
This small copper disc is the exact price of your morning's suffering. It is the reward for the blood on your knees and the ash in your lungs. You snatch it from the brick, your numb fingers clutching it tightly, and you run to the nearest stall.
For a farthing, you can purchase a dense, heavy wedge of yesterday's bread, or perhaps a small cold meat pie made from the unsellable scraps of the butcher's block. You do not care about the quality. You care only about the immediate, desperate need to silence the hollow ache in your center. You stand in the alleyway, eating in rapid, panicked bites, swallowing the food half-chewed. You eat with soot-stained hands, leaving dark, greasy thumbprints on the pale crust of the bread. Every bite tastes faintly of the chimney, the ash from your fingers transferring perfectly to your only meal. But there are other days when the flues are stubborn, when the soot is damp and heavy, when the housekeepers refuse to pay the master his full rate. On these days, the silent bookkeeping turns brutally against you. The master will stop at the same brick wall. He will look at the bags, perhaps kicking one slightly with the toe of his heavy boot to test its yield. He will look at you, his face a mask of hard, economic disappointment. He will not reach into his pocket. He will simply state the unbending law of the trade. You eat when the bags are full. He will turn and walk away, the heavy fabric of his coat swishing lightly against the damp air, and you must follow. You must swallow the burning saliva in your mouth, tighten the rough cord at your waist, and hoist the heavy, unyielding sacks back onto your raw shoulders. You learn in these long, starving afternoons how to retreat entirely into the rhythm of the walk. You separate your mind from the gnawing emptiness in your stomach, just as you separate it from the bleeding of your knees. You become a machine of endurance, placing one freezing foot in front of the other on the endless gray cobblestones. The city in the late afternoon transforms into an obstacle course of fatigue. The pale sun begins its early descent, and the damp chill returns to the air, cutting through the thin sweat that has dried cold on your skin. Every step sends a dull wooden shock up through your bare heels and into your aching shins. You cross wide, busy thoroughfares, weaving carefully between the heavy wooden wheels of dray carts and the impatient hooves of carriage horses. The noise of the city, the shouts of costermongers, the clatter of iron on stone, the distant chimes of a clock tower washes over you as a muffled, meaningless drone.
You are entirely consumed by the mechanics of the march. Left foot, right foot, drag the canvas. You learn to sleep while walking, allowing your eyes to half close, letting your body operate on a pure, mindless momentum. The rough rope handle of the sack has long ago rubbed the skin of your palm raw, and the canvas itself feels as though it is anchored to the very center of the earth. Yet you do not stop. You cannot stop. The weight of the soot presses down on your spine, bending you forward until you are staring only at the wet heels of the master's boots. The afternoon stretches out before you, an unbroken landscape of closed doors, cold iron railings, and towering brick stacks waiting to be climbed. The skin has paid its price. The soot has been gathered. The ledger is balanced for the hour, but the day is far from over. The brick keeps its width. You keep your breath. Somewhere below, the house pretends its warmth has no price.
You are 30 feet above the heavy cast-iron register plate, suspended in the absolute, suffocating blackness of a second-story drawing-room flue. For the first 20 feet, the climb was a standard, punishing rhythm of knees and back against a familiar 14-inch span.
But as you push higher, moving into the hidden architecture between the wealthy floors of the house, the geometry of the brick begins to betray you. The mason who laid this chimney was not concerned with the passage of a child. He was concerned only with bypassing a thick, supporting beam in the floorboards above. To do this, he severely angled the stack, dragging it sharply to the left and severely reducing its width. You feel the change before you fully understand it. The wall against your back, which should run perfectly parallel to the wall pressing against your knees, begins to lean inward. The rough, glazed brick presses closer to your spine with every upward thrust. The standard 14 inches compresses to 12, then to 11. You pull the coarse wool of your climbing cap down tighter over your eyes, a reflexive, useless shield against the heavy darkness. You tilt your head back, your climbing cap grazing the masonry, trying to sense the void above you. There is no straight shaft. There is only a sharp, blind turn. A ledge of protruding brick juts out sharply, blocking the path of your right shoulder. You have reached a bend that has no name. It is not recorded in the master's leather-bound book. It is a secret, malformed defect hidden inside the walls, and you are the only living thing forced to reckon with it. You try to shift your weight, attempting to angle your shoulders to match the slant of the brick. You drop your left hip, pushing your right knee higher into the tight, abrasive corner. You press, you scrape, you push upward with the raw, bruised strength of your legs. You do not move. You attempt to slide backward, dropping your heels a fraction of an inch to reassess the angle. But as you release the tension in your spine, the heel of your left foot catches on a thick, hardened lip of mortar, a sloppy coring left by a careless bricklayer a decade ago, now petrified into stone by years of intense heat. You cannot go up. You cannot go down. The brick has closed around you like a heavy, perfectly fitted mold of cold clay. The air in the narrow tunnel grows instantly thick. The absolute stillness of the space presses against your eardrums. In the profound dark, your heart begins to race, a rapid, fluttering panic that beats wildly against the tight cage of your ribs. It is the primal, overwhelming terror of the trapped animal, the sudden, desperate urge to thrash, to shout, to tear at the unyielding walls with your bare hands. But panic is a luxury that a climbing boy cannot afford. Panic expands the chest. Panic forces the lungs to draw in huge, greedy volumes of air, swelling the ribs outward against the masonry. If you allow the panic to take hold, your expanded chest will wedge you permanently between the bricks, locking you entirely in place. You must fight the terror with an immense, unnatural stillness. You close your eyes beneath the coarse wool. You force your jaw to unclench. Panic must be managed into small, deliberate actions. You force an exhale, emptying your lungs to make your torso as narrow as physically possible. Scrape, pause, dark, breath, brick, breath. You focus entirely on your right hand, the only part of your body that still has a few inches of freedom. Your numb fingers grip the heavy iron handle of the scraper. In a blind bend, the scraper must always go first. You cannot push your head into the narrowing gap until you know what the iron feels. You extend your arm painfully into the slanted void above your right shoulder, your elbow grinding against the rough, soot-caked wall. You tap the iron blade against the blockage. It is a solid wall of packed soot gathered deeply in this hidden ledge of the bend. Years of unburned carbon have drifted into this hidden corner, accumulating in heavy, soft layers like black snow. You begin to chip away at the mass, using only the weak, restricted motion of your wrist. The soot breaks loose. It does not fall past you. The flue is too tight. It falls directly on your head and shoulders. It fills the tiny sliver of air between your face and the brick. It pours over the wool of your cap in a heavy, blinding curtain. You keep your eyes tightly shut. You press your lips together, but the fine velvet powder forces its way into your nostrils. You are breathing a throat full of dust. It coats your tongue, your palate, and the back of your throat with a dry, suffocating paste. You swallow heavily, forcing the ash down, focusing only on the rhythmic tap of the scraper. Scrape, pause, dark. You carve out a handful of space. You force your right shoulder into the tiny hollow you have made. The skin of your upper arm tears against the jutting brick, a sharp, burning line of pain that you instantly push past. You are beginning to thread your body through the helix, twisting your spine to match the deformity of the chimney. But just as you gain a fraction of an inch, the atmosphere inside the flue abruptly changes. The damp, freezing air that has chilled you to the bone all morning suddenly shifts. A subtle, dry draft moves upward, brushing against the bare skin of your dangling heels. It is followed by a faint, unmistakable sound echoing up the long vertical throat of the chimney, the sharp, crisp crackle of dry paper catching a spark.
Far below, in the elegant drawing room, a mistake has been made. A new parlor maid, perhaps unaware that the master sweeps boy, still working in the upper bends of the stack, has decided to warm the freezing room. She has struck a match. She has lit the kindling in the grate. The heat rises fast. It does not arrive as a roaring flame, but as a stifling, suffocating wave of hot, dry air that shoots up the narrow shaft, seeking the sky. It hits your legs, warming your bruised knees, and then rapidly engulfs your entire body. The scent of sulfur, burning newsprint, and dry wood fills the tiny space, completely replacing the stale, metallic smell of old ash. The bend becomes a kiln. The temperature in the 14-inch void climbs dramatically. The heavy, damp sweat that coats your chest and back instantly turns to a hot, sticky mud as it mixes with the falling soot. The brick around you begins to absorb the rising heat, radiating it back against your skin. You cannot shout down to the maid. To open your mouth wide enough to scream would be to invite the falling powdery soot and the rising choking smoke directly into your lungs. You would suffocate long before your voice ever reached the register plate. You can only freeze. You press your face hard against the crook of your elbow, seeking the tiny pocket of slightly cooler, filtered air trapped in the fold of your rigid climbing shirt. This is the longest minute of your life. The smoke thickens, curling around your hips and rising past your ears. It stings the edges of your tightly closed eyes. Your lungs burn with the desperate need for clean oxygen, but you allow yourself only the smallest, shallowest sips of the roasting air. You endure the heat with a silent, claustrophobic patience. You retreat deep inside your own mind, focusing entirely on the slow, steady rhythm of your own faint heartbeat. You wait. You wait for the maid to realize her error, or for the small handful of kindling to burn itself out against the heavy, damp logs she has placed on top. Minutes stretch into an agonizing eternity. The heat presses against you, a physical weight. The sweat runs down your ribs in hot rivers, cutting clean, pale lines through the thick black grime on your skin. And then, slowly, the draft begins to cool. The sharp scent of burning paper fades, replaced by the acrid, smoldering smell of a smothered fire.
Someone below has noticed the smoke billowing back into the drawing room. Someone has thrown water on the grate. The crisis passes as quietly as it arrived. You are left exhausted, shivering violently as the damp, freezing air rushes back up the flue to replace the heat. Your muscles tremble uncontrollably, but you are still wedged in the bend. The brick has not moved.
You draw a deep, ragged breath of the cold, ashy air. You grip the iron scraper. You press your bleeding right shoulder against the protruding masonry, ignoring the screaming pain in your collarbone. With a final, desperate heave of your raw knees, you twist your hips and pull. The space gives. Your ribs scrape harshly against the mortar, but your shoulders slip past the narrow ledge. You drag your legs up, pulling yourself entirely into the wider, straighter vertical shaft that leads toward the roof. You rest your forehead against the cold, flat brick of the upper flue, your entire body shaking, your breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. You do not look back down into the dark. You simply raise the scraper into the blackness above and begin again. The brick keeps its width. You keep your breath. Somewhere below, the house pretends it did not almost bury you in the wall.
The chimney is not merely a vertical tunnel of brick and unburned carbon. It is the hollow central spine of the house, a dark acoustic chamber that carries the secret life of the rooms above and below. As you push higher, leaving the suffocating heat of the drawing room bend behind you, the physical geometry of the climb straightens, but a new, profound weight settles over your shoulders. It is the weight of proximity. You are moving invisibly through the very walls of a waking world, separated from its comforts by a single course of mortared clay. When you pause to let the burning in your thighs subside, when you stop the harsh, rhythmic grinding of the iron scraper and hold yourself perfectly still in the dark, the silence of the flue is broken. The chimney acts as a giant, soot-lined ear. The vibrations travel through the floorboards, into the masonry, and directly into the bones of your pressed cheek. Press, pause, listen. Brick, vibration, breath. You are level with the second floor now. Through the cold, unyielding wall to your left, you hear the heavy, muffled thud of a thick oak door clicking perfectly shut. The sound is rich and solid, speaking of heavy brass hinges and perfectly joined wood. Then comes the slow, measured ticking of a tall clock in the hallway. It is a calm, unhurried rhythm, keeping time for people who own the hours of their day. You press your ear closer to the crust of the brick. You can hear the faint, delicate chime of silver meeting porcelain, a spoon gently stirring sugar into a fragile teacup. The sounds are distorted, muffled by the layers of plaster, wallpaper, and ash, sounding like stones moving under water. Yet they are intimately clear. You hear a low, melodic murmur of a woman's voice, followed by the deeper, resonant hum of a man's reply. There is no urgency in their tone. There is only the casual, comfortable exchange of a morning begun in absolute security. They are sitting in a room bathed in pale winter sunlight, surrounded by upholstered chairs, thick woven rugs, and the faint, sweet scent of lavender and polished mahogany. You are inches away, suspended in the absolute pitch black. Your hands are numb, your elbows are bruised a deep, mottled purple, and your lungs are lined with the bitter dust of their previous fires. You are the shadow in their walls, the necessary invisible mechanism that allows their comfort to exist.
You are so close that you can hear the rustle of a heavy newspaper turning in the man's hands, yet you exist in an entirely separate universe. If you were to slip, if your knees were to fail, and you were to slide down the shaft, they would not hear your muffled cries through the thick plaster. The house is designed to insulate them from the mechanics of their own warmth. The house is designed to not hear you.
As you inch past the floorboards of the master suite, another sound bleeds through the adjoining brick. It is the sharp, distinct scrape of an iron poker against an ash pan. In the bedchamber next door, a parlor maid is kneeling at the hearth, preparing the morning fire. You hear the crisp crackle of kindling being snapped into smaller lengths, the soft sweeping sound of a hand brush clearing away yesterday's dust, and the heavy, metallic clatter of fresh coal being shoveled into the grate. It is a precise, practiced rhythm. Then you hear the faint hiss of a striking match. You cannot feel the heat through the thick dividing wall, but the sounds alone conjure a vivid, painful memory of the warmth you are forbidden to touch. A moment later, the intricate drafts of the house betray you in a different way. The central chimney stack acts as a massive lung, pulling air from the lower floors and channeling it upward into the network of connecting flues. Riding on this invisible current comes the unmistakable, heavy aroma of the kitchen far below. The smell of frying bacon and rendering fat cuts directly through the stale, metallic taste of the soot in your throat. It is followed by the sweet, yeasty scent of fresh bread baking on the iron range and the dark, bitter aroma of roasted coffee beans. These phantom scents swirl around your face in the pitch black, a cruel, invisible feast that makes your empty stomach cramp violently. Your mouth waters, the sudden moisture stinging the deep cracks in your lips. You are forced to swallow down the dry ash, trying desperately to block out the smell of a breakfast you will never be permitted to taste. The sensory torture of the house is almost worse than the physical pain of the brick, reminding you with every drawn breath of the nourishment that exists just a few feet away. You grip the scraper and resume the climb. Push, slide, hold. The noise of your own labor, the harsh rasp of the iron, the heavy, suffocating cascade of falling soot, the sharp whistling intake of your own breath drowns out the parlor and the phantom kitchen. You focus on the immediate suffering of your joints, forcing your battered body another 5 feet up the stack. When you reach the 3rd floor, the flue narrows slightly, passing between the walls of the upper bedchambers. You wedge your spine firmly into a tight, slightly angled section of the brickwork and pause to catch your breath. The air here is thinner, colder, tasting faintly of the damp fog that waits above the roofline. You close your eyes beneath the coarse wool of your cap, letting the heavy, velvety darkness press against your eyelids. Then, through the brick directly in front of your face, comes a sound that freezes your blood in your veins. It is the high, clear, unrestrained laugh of a child. You hold your breath. The laugh comes again, followed by the rapid, chaotic patter of small, bare feet running across wooden floorboards. You are passing behind the wall of the nursery. The sounds bleed through the masonry with startling clarity. You hear the heavy, hollow clatter of wooden blocks tumbling onto a carpet. You hear a governess's voice, soft and chiding, urging the child to sit still, to put on their woolen stockings against the morning chill. The child on the other side of the brick is perhaps exactly your height. They are perhaps exactly your age. But the space between you is measured in infinite, unbridgeable distances.
That child is waking to a bowl of warm, sugared oats, to the bright dancing flames of a carefully laid fire, to the gentle touch of a hand smoothing their hair. Their body is a vessel for growth, carefully nourished and fiercely protected. Your body is a tool. Your childhood was traded for a few heavy coins and a pallet of damp straw. Your skin is a ledger of cuts and calluses. Your hair is matted with the toxic grime of 100 chimneys, and your hands are cramped from the endless, desperate grip on the iron handle. For a single, fleeting moment, an overwhelming, crushing wave of loneliness washes over you. It is a physical ache in the center of your chest, heavier than the soot bag, sharper than the cold air. You want to reach out. You want to tap the heavy iron handle of your scraper against the brick just once to signal that you are here, to say that there is another boy hidden in the dark. But you do not move. You remain perfectly, terrifyingly still. You know the absolute law of the master's yard. You are not a boy to the house. You are a sweep. If you were to make your presence known, if you were to shatter the illusion of their isolated comfort, the governess would scream, the master of the house would complain to your master, and your punishment, delivered in the freezing damp of the packing shed that night, would be severe. You are paid to be invisible. You are paid to absorb the filth and leave no trace of your humanity behind. You swallow the hard knot in your throat. The saliva tastes of copper and old smoke. You force the loneliness down, packing it away tightly in the dark corners of your mind, just as you pack the soot into the canvas bags. You cannot afford the luxury of sorrow. Sorrow makes the limbs heavy. Sorrow breaks the concentration required to hold a 14-inch span. You push upward, scraping the brick with a renewed mechanical ferocity, drowning out the sounds of the nursery with the harsh, rasping echo of your own survival.
The chimney continues its ascent, passing through the upper servants' quarters. The walls here are thinner, the brickwork less refined. Through the mortar, you hear the frantic, hurried sounds of a different kind of labor. The heavy slosh of water in a tin basin, the rapid, exhausted scrubbing of a brush against a floorboard, a sharp, reprimanding whisper from a senior maid. The people in these attic rooms are also bound to the house, also invisible in their own way, but they move in the light. They breathe clean air. Even the lowest scullery maid would cross the street to avoid the smell of your clothes. You are the lowest layer of the city's foundation, buried in the vertical dirt. As you climb past the attic ceilings, the ambient warmth of the house abruptly vanishes. The sounds of the household fade into a distant, muffled hum and then disappear entirely, swallowed by the sheer mass of the brick stack. The temperature inside the flue drops dramatically. You are entering the final stretch, the long, freezing neck of the chimney that extends above the slate roof and into the open winter sky. The absolute silence returns, ringing in your soot-filled ears. There is no more ticking clock. There is no more laughing child. There is only the rough, frozen mortar scraping against your bleeding elbows and the howling, mournful sound of the wind rushing over the terracotta pot far above your head. You are entirely alone again. The house has released you from its auditory embrace, leaving you with nothing but the numb, aching reality of your own body. You press your spine against the cold brick, drawing your knees up for the final ascent. You do not resent the family in the bright rooms below. Resentment requires energy. You only focus on the wind, the heavy scraper, and the desperate, burning need to see the first pale circle of gray light. The brick keeps its width. You keep your breath. Somewhere below, the house pretends it cannot hear you listening.
The day finally collapses into the freezing, damp enclosure of the master's cellar. The long, brutal march across the cobblestones is over. The heavy canvas sacks, swollen with the black harvest of a dozen wealthy hearths, have been emptied into the brick storage bins in the packing shed. The master has retired to his kitchen above, the heavy latch on the cellar door sliding shut with a final metallic finality. You are left in the absolute pitch black, but you are not alone. As your eyes slowly adjust to the profound darkness, the shadows begin to separate into the shapes of other small, broken bodies. There are 4 of you in the yard, a miniature silent firm of climbing boys bound to the same master, breathing the same stagnant air. The cellar is a hollow chamber of stone and damp earth, yet it is the only sanctuary you possess. Here, beneath the floorboards of the waking world, the relentless pressure of the flues is temporarily lifted. Here, there is a quiet, hidden community of the invisible. You stand in the center of the room, peeling off the outermost layer of your stiff, soot-caked clothing. The cold air of the cellar instantly bites at the damp sweat on your chest. You move toward the pallet of flattened straw in the corner, guided by the familiar sounds of the dark. Rustle, shift, breath, straw, stone, silence. A distinct hierarchy governs this freezing space, an unspoken order dictated not by age or birthright, but by size, strength, and the raw capacity to endure the brick. The largest share of the empty canvas sacks, the only insulation against the bitter cold of the floor, is claimed by the oldest boy. He is perhaps 12, though his spine is already beginning to curve from years of carrying 50 pounds of packed soot. His voice is dropping into a gravelly, hoarse register, and his shoulders are growing dangerously broad. He is approaching the terrifying threshold where the 14-inch flues will no longer accept him. He moves with a slow, deliberate stiffness, his joints permanently swollen. He does not ask for the thickest sacks, he simply takes them, a silent assertion of his tenure. You do not challenge him. You know that within a year he will either be made a journeyman or he will be turned out into the street, too large for the master to feed. Beside him sits the boy with the rattling cough. You remember the sound of his breathing from the early hours of the morning, a dry, wheezing sigh that echoed against the brick. Now, in the quiet of the night, the true extent of his sickness is impossible to ignore. He sits with his knees pulled tightly to his chest, his thin frame racked by sudden violent spasms. He is the smartest boy in the yard, the one who knows how to read the complex chalk marks on the doors, the one who can untangle the most stubbornly knotted climbing ropes in the dark. But the trade does not reward a quick mind, it only tallies the lungs.
The soot has settled deep into his chest. He no longer climbs the bad houses, the twisting, horizontal bends that demand a bottomless reserve of breath. The master, calculating the boy's diminishing utility, now uses him primarily to haul the heaviest bags and to scrub the long-handled brushes in the freezing yard. You listen to the wet, tearing sound of his cough, a terrible percussion in the quiet cellar. There is no physician to call. There is no remedy to be found. There is only the quiet, mutual understanding that his time in the trade is drawing to a premature, suffocating close. He spits a dark, thick substance onto the dirt floor, wipes his cracked lips with the back of a blackened hand, and closes his eyes. Then there is the new boy. He arrived only a week ago, a tiny, terrified child bound by the parish, possessing a frame so small it seems entirely impossible that he could survive the weight of the iron scraper. He sits on the very edge of the straw, trembling violently. He has not yet learned to suppress his tears. In the absolute dark, you can hear his quiet, rhythmic sobbing, a sound he tries desperately to muffle by burying his face in his thin, bruised knees.
The tears trace clean, pale lines through the thick grime on his cheeks, the only clean skin in the entire cellar. His knees are a ruin of fresh, open wounds. He has not yet developed the thick, hardened calluses that armor the older boys. He does not know how to brace his spine. He does not know how to time his breathing with the falling ash. He is entirely consumed by the immediate, overwhelming trauma of the brick. In the brutal economy of the master's yard, weakness is a liability. Pity is a luxury that starving boys can rarely afford. And yet, beneath the crust of the soot and the bitter cold, a fleeting, bruised tenderness occasionally survives. You crawl across the damp straw toward the new boy. You do not speak. Words are heavy, and they draw the cold air into the lungs. You reach into the dark, your numb fingers finding the rough, frayed edge of a small cloth. It is a piece of torn, discarded linen scavenged from a rubbish heap behind a tailor's shop weeks ago. It is saturated with ash, but it is soft. You press the rag into the small, shaking hand. You guide his fingers toward his raw, weeping knee, showing him how to bind the cloth tightly around the joint, fashioning a rudimentary pad against the unforgiving glaze of the flues. He sniffles, his small fingers fumbling clumsily with the knot in the pitch black. You reach out, your own blackened, calloused hands brushing against his icy skin, and pull the knot tight for him.
He does not say thank you. You do not expect him to. But his sobbing slows, reducing to a quiet, ragged hiccup. It is a small mercy, a momentary shield against the inevitable violence of tomorrow's climbs. In this shared, suffocating space, you are not rivals, you are fellow prisoners of the hearth. You understand his pain with a profound, terrifying intimacy, because you wear the exact same wounds beneath your own stiffened trousers. As you settle back onto your meager portion of the straw, pulling a single thin canvas sack over your shivering shoulders, your eyes drift to the small, empty space near the cellar wall. It is a quiet absence, a void in the straw that speaks louder than the whistling wind outside. 2 weeks ago, there were 5 boys in the cellar. The 5th was a quiet, nimble child, no older than 8. He was fast in the straight flues, slipping up the vertical shafts with a terrifying, desperate speed. But last week, the master secured a contract as a large storage warehouse near the river docks. The flues there were not domestic. They were massive, complex industrial vents, choked with dense, oily residue and twisting in unmapped, illogical directions. The boy was sent into the opening just after dawn. You waited on the stone floor, holding the bags. The master shouted into the grate, his voice echoing hollowly in the massive stack. But no voice answered. There was no sudden scream. There was no dramatic collapse of brick. There was simply a profound, enduring silence. The master waited an hour. He beat his heavy wooden stick against the masonry. He sent the oldest boy up the adjacent flue to tap on the shared wall. Nothing. The chimney had simply swallowed him whole, trapping him in a blind, nameless bend somewhere deep inside the colossal architecture of the warehouse. The master, recognizing the loss of his property, but unable to halt his daily ledger, eventually gathered his ropes and walked away. The boy did not come back. He became a shadow, a whispered warning among the apprentices. His absence is a quiet, heavy fact of the trade, a sober reminder of the razor-thin line between a cleared chimney and a permanent tomb. You look at the new boy, shivering in the dark, and you recognize the oversized, coarse wool cap pulled down over his ears. It is an inheritance. It is the cap of the boy who went into the warehouse. The tools remain, only the bodies change. The cold of the cellar floor begins to seep into your bones. The damp chill is relentless, a physical weight that presses you all closer together. The four of you instinctively curl inward, forming a tight, tangled knot of bruised limbs and soot-stained rags. You press your back against the spine of the older boy, absorbing the meager, fragile heat radiating from his skin. The new boy presses against your chest, his small, trembling frame seeking anchor in the dark.
You close your eyes. The sounds of the cellar settle into a rhythmic, communal breathing. The sharp, wet cough, the quiet, lingering sniffle, the slow, heavy inhale of exhaustion. You breathe in the scent of them, the stale sweat, the ancient wood smoke, the damp earth. It is a terrible, foul odor, yet it is deeply familiar. It is the smell of survival. Above you, the heavy floorboards creak as the master turns in his bed. Beyond the cellar walls, the vast, wealthy city sleeps under its white linens, entirely oblivious to the small, blackened hands that ensure its morning will be warm. You are buried in the dark, a forgotten cog in the immense machinery of the Victorian age. But here, in the freezing straw, wrapped in the borrowed warmth of other broken boys, you are not entirely alone. The brick keeps its width. You keep your breath. Somewhere above, the house pretends the dark is empty.
In a life defined entirely by the brutal measurements of brick and the unyielding arithmetic of the master's ledger, hope is a dangerous and heavy thing to carry. Hope requires the luxury of a future, a belief in a world that might one day look different than the absolute black of the flue. You do not possess a future. You possess only the immediate, desperate reality of the next 14-inch span. You do not dream of grand reforms, of men in Parliament passing laws in rooms you will never see. Such things are phantoms. But even in this suffocating dark, the world is not entirely devoid of grace. There are moments of quiet, profound relief that keep the body moving when the mind has surrendered. In the long, vertical dark, there are 3 small mercies. The first mercy is the sudden, blinding gift of the sky. It happens only at the very top of the tallest stacks, at the end of a long, punishing climb through a wealthy townhouse. You have spent an hour enclosed in the hot, stagnant throat of the house, your lungs lined with dry powder, your knees weeping against the mortar. The air has grown steadily thinner, the draft pulling harder against the heavy wool of your cap. The soot here is not caked and sticky, it is dry and loose, swept upward by the continuous rush of the wind. You push your scraper above your head, expecting the familiar, dull scrape of iron against brick. Instead, the metal rings out with a hollow, melodic chime. It has struck the smooth, curved interior of the terracotta chimney pot. You drop the scraper, letting it hang by the leather thong from your wrist, and reach your bare, blackened hands upward. The rough, abrasive friction of the mortar abruptly vanishes, replaced by the cool, smooth glaze of baked clay. You grip the lip of the pot. You brace your raw knees one final time, draw a deep, desperate breath, and pull your head and shoulders up into the open air. The transition is a physical shock. The absolute suffocating dark of the flue is instantly shattered by the vast, gray expanse of the winter sky. You pull the coarse climbing cap back from your eyes. The pale, watery morning sun hits your face, a weak light that nonetheless carries a profound, penetrating warmth. It touches your soot-stained cheeks, thawing the icy dampness that has settled deep into your bones. You do not look down at the dizzying drop to the street below. You look out. You are surrounded by a sweeping, jagged ocean of slate roofs, lead gutters, and 1,000 other smoking pots. Up here, you are entirely alone, but the isolation is not a prison. It is a temporary, magnificent kingship. The master is 100 feet below, his voice incapable of reaching you through the wind. The wealthy family is buried beneath layers of plaster and timber. For this single fragile minute, you belong to no one but the sky.
Wind, slate, breath, sun, clay, sky. You open your mouth and take a long, deliberate breath. The air is piercingly cold, tasting of frost and distant river water, entirely devoid of the metallic, suffocating tang of ancient ash. It floods your burning lungs, a pure, clean draught that washes the panic from your chest. You let the wind strip the loose soot from your heavy shirt. You close your eyes, resting your chin against the cold terracotta, and simply let the sun hold you. It is a mercy that lasts only as long as you dare to linger before the master's cane begins to tap angrily on the grate far below. But for that single minute, the flue cannot touch you. The second mercy is found in the silent grace of a stranger's hands. It happens on the descent, after you have returned to the stone floor of the scullery, your canvas bag heavy with the morning's harvest. The grand cook is busy at the heavy iron range, her voice sharp and impatient, demanding that the sweep gather his dirt and leave her pristine kitchen. But in the corner, standing by the deep stone sink, is the scullery maid. She is not much older than the oldest boy in your cellar. Her hands are raw and red from the lye soap and the freezing water. She wears a coarse linen apron over a faded dress, her own life bound to the endless, exhausting rhythm of the house's dirt. She knows the heavy, grinding machinery of labor. She knows what it is to be invisible. As you stand shivering by the back door, waiting for the master to settle the account, she does not look at you with the familiar tight-lipped disgust of the upper servants. She does not pull her skirts away as you pass. Instead, she moves quietly toward the heavy wooden cutting board near the pantry door. With her back turned to the cook, she takes a thick, heel-end crust of newly baked bread. It is a piece too tough for the master's dining room, destined for the kitchen scraps. She dips a wooden spoon into a heavy iron crock of beef dripping, the rich, salty rendered fat from last night's roast, and smears it thickly across the rough surface of the bread. She does not walk over to you. She does not offer it with a smile or a word of pity, for any interaction would draw the wrath of the cook and the heavy hand of your master. She simply walks to the edge of the stone sink, places the bread precisely on the corner of the wooden draining board, and walks away. She plunges her red hands back into the soapy water, scrubbing a copper pot with intense, exaggerated focus. She looks out the window. She deliberately pretends you do not exist. It is the most profound dignity she could possibly offer you. She has recognized your starvation, and she has provided for it without demanding that you perform the humiliating pantomime of a beggar.
You step forward, silently. Your blackened fingers close around the crust. You slide it quickly into the deep pocket of your oversized cloak, the grease immediately soaking into the heavy wool. When you are finally out on the wet cobblestones, trailing 10 paces behind the master,
You pull it out. The taste is an overwhelming shock to your senses. The bread is dense and yielding, soft against your raw, aching gums. But it is the dripping that is the true luxury. The rich, savory fat coats your tongue, washing away the dry, bitter taste of the chimney. It soothes your cracked lips. The coarse salt bites sharply, waking the exhausted muscles of your jaw. It is a heavy, sustaining warmth that blooms in the center of your hollow stomach, a small furnace of actual nourishment that will carry you through the 3 remaining bad houses on the ledger. You eat it slowly, savoring every crumb, fiercely guarding the memory of the maid who looked away so that you might eat. The third and greatest mercy is the heavy arrival of the Saturday sleep. 6 days a week, your life is dictated by the master's boot on the stair and the terrible vertical geometry of the brick. But Sunday is the Sabbath. On Sunday, the flues of the city are left alone. The master does not climb, and the ledger is briefly closed. This means that Saturday night in the freezing cellar possesses a different texture entirely. The dreadful hard knot of anticipation that sits in your stomach every other night of the week, the bodily terror of the morning's bends, is remarkably absent. Sometimes, if the week has been particularly profitable, the master's wife will leave a single heavy wooden bucket at the top of the cellar stairs. It is filled with the leftover water from her own evening wash. It is murky and gray, holding only a faint memory of heat, but to you it is a miracle. You and the other boys gather around it in the dim light of a single sputtering tallow candle. You take a scrap of coarse cloth, dip it into the tepid water, and press it against your face. The lye soap stings the open cuts on your cheeks, a sharp, biting pain that you welcome. You scrub the thickest, most abrasive crust of soot from your eyelids, from the deep creases around your nose, and from the corners of your cracked lips. You wipe the heavy layer of black grease from your bleeding knees. For the first time in 6 days, your pores are open to the air. Your skin, though battered and bruised a mottled purple, feels remarkably light. The water turns entirely black within minutes, but the ritual is complete. You have washed away the heaviest part of the trade. You return to your pallet of flattened straw. Because there is no wake-up call waiting in the absolute dark of tomorrow morning, your body finally allows itself to power down. The survival instinct that keeps your muscles coiled tight, ready to push against the falling ash, slowly begins to unspool.
You pull the canvas soot bag over your shivering shoulders. The damp cold of the cellar floor is still there, but tonight it cannot touch you. You close your eyes, and the phantom sensation of the brick pressing against your spine begins to fade. The harsh, scraping echo of the iron in your ears is replaced by the slow, communal breathing of the other boys settling into the straw. Release, breath, dark, straw, silence, rest. The sleep that arrives on Saturday night is not the fragile, shivering doze of a Tuesday. It is a heavy, profound, dreamless descent. It pulls you under like a warm tide. Your clenched hands softly open, the fingers uncurling in the dark. The sharp ache in your elbows dulls to a distant, manageable throb. You sink deeply into the mattress of the earth, surrendering the immense, crushing weight of the week. Tomorrow, you will not climb. Tomorrow, you will simply breathe. The dark is no longer a 14-inch coffin. It is a soft, enveloping blanket that asks nothing of your bruised shoulders. The brick keeps its width. You keep your breath. Somewhere above, the house pretends you do not need to rest. Your bare heels strike the cast-iron register plate with a heavy, exhausted thud. A thick cloud of dry ash billows up around your ankles, settling slowly onto the cold stone hearth of the day's final house. You drop the heavy iron scraper. It clatters against the grate, the sound ringing sharply in the quiet, dim light of the late afternoon kitchen. You step backward, pulling the coarse wool of your climbing cap away from your eyes, and take a long, shallow breath of the room's cool, filtered air. The climb is finished. The last heavy canvas sack is tied securely at the neck, bulging with the final harvest of soot. You stand in the shadows beside the pantry door, waiting for the master to collect his coin. But a new, quiet heaviness lingers in your limbs today. It is not merely the familiar exhaustion of a 12-hour march across the city's rooftops. It is a deeper, more profound ache, a creeping realization that settles into the very marrow of your bones. There is a terrible, silent treason happening beneath the stiff, blackened fabric of your climbing shirt. Your body is attempting to grow. It is the most natural instinct of the human frame, a quiet biological mandate to expand, to build muscle, to widen the shoulders and lengthen the spine. But in the master's yard, growth is not a triumph. Growth is an economic death sentence. You are perhaps 12 years old, though no one has kept a faithful record of your birth. For half your life, your survival has depended entirely on your ability to remain small, to fold yourself into a human wedge, to vanish completely into a space no larger than a stack of parlor Bibles. But the 14 inches of the standard flue have not changed, and your collarbones have begun to betray you. Bone, brick, breath, flesh, mortar, time. You felt it acutely in the drawing-room chimney just an hour ago. It was a straight, vertical shaft, a climb you have made a dozen times before without hesitation. But today, as you pressed your spine against the back wall and drew your knees up to your chest, the geometry of the space felt aggressively wrong. Your right shoulder scraped heavily against the glazed lining before you even began to push. You had to exhale completely, emptying your lungs of every last ounce of air just to slide your ribcage past a slightly protruding ledge of sloppy mortar. The master has noticed. You have caught him watching you in the freezing damp of the packing shed, his eyes narrowing as he tracks the changing lines of your silhouette against the pale morning fog. He watches the way your wrists now extend past the frayed cuffs of your oversized cloak. He measures the increasing width of your back with a cold, calculating ledger behind his eyes. He is a businessman, and you are a piece of stock that is rapidly aging out of its utility. Soon, you will become a liability, a boy who gets permanently stuck, a boy who requires a mason to break open a wealthy man's wall.
When the master decides you are finally too large, the trade will simply let you go. But the release is not a liberation. If the flue rejects you, who are you? You have no other craft. You do not know the alphabet. You only know the tactile language of rough brick and hardened soot. You do not know how to hold a pen, how to drive a cart, or how to operate the heavy looms of the northern mills. Your entire education has been a masterclass in darkness, a profound, agonizing study of the hidden architecture of other people's warmth. Even if the master were to hand you your parish binding papers tomorrow and turn you out into the street, the chimney will never truly let you go. The trade has rewritten the very blueprint of your body. Your spine no longer stands perfectly straight. It has taken on the permanent, subtle curve of a boy who has spent his formative years perpetually hunched beneath a heavy, loaded sack, bending forward to avoid the low ceilings of the subterranean kitchens. Your knees and elbows will carry the thick, discolored armor of their calluses to the grave.
Your hands, stained a deep, permanent gray, rest in a natural half-curl, the fingers permanently shaped to accommodate the heavy wooden handle of the hand brush and the flat iron of the scraper. And then there is the soot. It is not merely a layer of dirt that can be washed away with a bucket of lye soap on a Saturday night. Over the years, the microscopic carbon has worked its way beneath the surface of your skin, settling permanently into the deepest pores and the fine healing lines of your scars. It marks you, an indelible dark tattooing that identifies you to anyone who looks closely. Even if you were to walk into a bright, clean room in a fresh linen shirt, the gray shadows embedded in your knuckles and beneath your eyes would announce your history. You are built of the ash, and the ash remains. Sometimes, as you stand silently by the back doors of the grand terraces, you hear the distant weather of a changing world. You hear the crisp, authoritative rustle of a broadsheet newspaper in the parlor and the master of the house arguing with the cook. You hear murmurs of a new era, of machines designed to take the place of boys. You have seen them in the streets, the older journeymen carrying long, flexible canes of Malacca wood, screwed together end to end, topped with a stiff, round brush of whalebone. They call it the machine. The reformers and the magistrates advocate for its use, passing mandates in distant echoing halls, declaring that the mechanical brush will finally bring an end to the climbing boys.
Your master despises the machine. He spits on the cobblestones when another sweep walks past, carrying the bundled rods. He argues vehemently with the housekeepers, insisting that no wooden cane can navigate the sharp, horizontal zigzags of a bad house. A brush cannot bend its elbow. A brush cannot hold a scraper to chip away the petrified, hardened blaze of a neglected stack. He tells them that the machines will leave the soot in the corners, that the flues will catch fire, and that they will ultimately beg for a boy to clear the blockage. But you can feel the slow, inevitable shift in the tide. The heavy wooden rods are becoming more common in the wealthy squares. The world is slowly, deliberately attempting to close the register plate on your trade. Yet this distant mechanical progress offers you no comfort. A machine may save the next generation of parish orphans from the bag, but it does nothing for the boy whose lungs are already lined with powder. If the brush takes the flue, the master will have no need to feed you. The march of progress is merely another cold draft blowing down the chimney, threatening to extinguish the only fragile, brutal livelihood you have ever known. Change, shadow, silence, time, brick, breath. The master finally emerges from the drawing room hallway, dropping a few silver coins into his deep pocket. He does not speak, he merely gestures toward the back door with the heavy iron ferrule of his walking stick. You hoist the 2 bursting canvas bags onto your shoulders. The thick ropes bite instantly into your bruised collarbones, but you adjust your posture, leaning forward into the familiar, crushing weight. You step out of the warm house and into the fading light of the day. The pale winter sun has already vanished behind the jagged skyline of chimney pots, and the thick, damp fog is rolling back into the streets, painted in deep, bruised shades of charcoal and violet. The gas lamps are beginning to flicker to life on the corners, casting long, wavering halos of yellow light against the wet cobblestones. The city is transitioning into its evening rhythm. The heavy carts have finished their deliveries, replaced by the soft, elegant clatter of carriage wheels carrying the wealthy to their dinners.
You walk through this glittering world entirely unseen, a slow-moving shadow dragging the physical refuse of their comfort through the damp streets. The walk back to the master's yard is a quiet, meditative descent into the night. You do not think about the expanding width of your shoulders, or the mechanical brushes, or the men in Parliament. You separate your mind from the physical pain of your blistered feet, retreating into the rhythmic, hypnotic sway of the heavy bags. You place one freezing foot in front of the other, allowing the cold fog to numb the stinging cuts on your face. When you finally reach the heavy wooden door of the cellar, the deep, hollow silence of the packing shed is waiting. You empty the bags into the brick bins, the soot falling with a soft, velvet sigh. You strip away the rigid, blackened uniform of the trade, shivering as the freezing air of the cellar hits your damp skin. You crawl onto your section of the flattened straw, pulling the empty canvas over your shivering shoulders. The youngest boy is already asleep, his breathing slow and ragged. The older boy is staring blankly into the dark, perhaps calculating his own dwindling days before the flues reject him entirely. You press your back against the cold brick of the cellar wall. You close your eyes. The deep, heavy exhaustion pulls you down, a tide of dark water washing over a fractured hull. You have survived another day of the vertical dark. You have paid the toll of your skin, and you have drawn breath where no breath was meant to be drawn. The future is an unmapped, terrifying void, but tonight the cold floor is solid. The day is done. You let your muscles unspool, surrendering your bruised frame to the absolute, forgiving silence of the night. The brick keeps its width. You keep your breath. Somewhere below, the house pretends it was never part of the dark. The heavy timber door of the cellar is finally closed, and the freezing, damp air of the Victorian night is locked safely away on the other side. The absolute dark of the packing shed slowly begins to soften, losing its suffocating weight. The rough, abrasive texture of the canvas soot bags, the damp chill of the flattened straw, and the phantom ache of the narrow flues all begin to dissolve into the quiet mist of the past. You are no longer bound to the master's ledger. You are no longer a captive of the brick. You are simply yourself, returning from a long journey through the shadows of history, back into the quiet, absolute safety of your own room. Feel the space around you. The law of the 14-inch flue does not apply here. The ceiling above you is high, and the walls are wide and protective. There is no heavy, glazed masonry pressing against your shoulders. You do not need to pull your knees to your chest. You do not need to hold your spine in a rigid, bracing arch to keep from falling. You can stretch your legs fully, feeling the muscles of your calves and thighs unspool and lengthen. You can let your arms rest heavily at your sides, the phantom grip on the iron scraper releasing entirely from your fingers. The mattress beneath you rises to meet your weight, supporting every joint, every tired bone, asking absolutely nothing of your endurance. The coarse, stiff wool of the climbing clothes fades away, replaced by the soft, clean weave of your own blankets. They do not smell of ancient wood smoke, rusted grates, or damp mortar. They carry only the faint, comforting scent of fresh laundry and your own quiet home. The air in your room is clear and still. There is no dry powder falling from the dark, no harsh draft pulling at the chimney pot. Take a slow, deep breath. Let your lungs expand entirely. The air is cool, clean, and pure, washing through your chest without restriction. You can breathe as deeply as you wish, with no fear of the ash. In the quiet landscape of your mind, imagine stepping away from the soot-stained flagstones of the scullery and approaching a wide porcelain wash basin. It is filled with clean, steaming water. There is no harsh lye soap here, only a soft, heavy cloth resting on the surface. Imagine taking that warm cloth and gently pressing it to your face. Feel the soothing heat relaxing the muscles of your jaw, softening the tension around your eyes, and smoothing the lines of your forehead.
As you wipe the cloth across your skin, imagine the figurative ash of your own day washing away. We all carry our own heavy canvas bags through the waking hours. We all navigate the narrow, difficult bends of our responsibilities, scraping our way through the rigid expectations and the tiring ledgers of the modern world. But that labor is done now. The day's account is settled. The soot of your stress, the gray dust of your hurried thoughts, the heavy residue of all the things you were required to manage today, let the warm water rinse it all away. Watch the water run clear. Your skin is clean. Your mind is permitted to be still. The master's morning book is closed. The addresses are crossed out. The farthings have been counted, and the heavy leather cover has been clasped shut and placed in a drawer. You do not need to know what is written on tomorrow's pages. You do not need to chart the route for the morning. The future is a distant, sleeping city, and you are not required to walk its streets until the sun is high. For now, there is only the profound, restorative pause of the night. The sprawling, fog-choked boroughs of the 19th century are quietly fading back into the archive of time. The grand townhouses, the narrow terraces, and the towering brick stacks are crumbling softly into memory. The climbing boys have stepped out of the chimneys forever. Their brutal labor is finished, their heavy bags are empty, and their history has been safely recorded. They are resting now in the quiet, undisturbed pages of the past, and you are allowed to rest alongside them, entirely free from the weight of their world. Let the last remnants of the day fall away. Sink deeper into the pillows. Let the steady, rhythmic sound of your own breathing become the only clock that matters. A slow, gentle tide pulling you further and further from the waking shore. Thank you for taking this long, dark walk with history for sleepyheads. Sleep well. The brick keeps its width. You keep your breath. Somewhere below, the house is finally at rest.